Hello everybody and welcome back. This is Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana. Today we're going to talk a little bit about choosing between a revolver or a semi-automatic for your concealed carry handgun. Now, some of you might already have a semi-automatic and you might be considering a revolver, or vice versa, or maybe you're a first-time buyer, you want to get into the concealed carry market and you don't know which way to go, a revolver or a semi-automatic. So the purpose of this video is I'm just going to go through the characteristics of both, weighing in on some of the pros and the cons, so that when you're in a gun store and you're able to look, get your hands on these individual items, you're able to make a more informed decision specifically for your needs, okay? The purpose of this video is not to say which one is better, more or less, just to say what are some of the pros, some of the cons, and what would fit into the things that I might be thinking about, or what might be important to me, or how it might fit me as a concealed carrier. I'm going to bring on the camera in and we're going to go through the basics of each. So here we have a M&P Shield by Smith & Wesson. This is going to be a representation of a semi-automatic. And then this is our 637-2 by Smith & Wesson. Okay, this is going to be our representation of a double single action revolver. The basic characteristics of each, and to put it very simply, is a semi-automatic, just like the name would suggest, or the title would suggest, that it fires its ammunition semi-automatically, which means when you pull the trigger, the firearm is going to fire. Automatically, the slide will come to the rear, eject your spent casing, chamber a new round, and you'll be able to fire again. Semi-automatic, one round for one pull of the trigger. The revolver we have over here, the main difference, or the main defining characteristic, is it is also one round per one pull of the trigger, but you don't have any function going on inside the firearm other than the rotation of the cylinder and the dropping of the striker, which means there's no ejection, there's no extraction, then no ejection, no rechambering of a new round, okay? All that's happening is you pull the trigger, the cylinder turns, indexing the new round ready to fire. So those are the two basic key differences between the two. The Smith & Wesson Shield here is a striker-fired firearm, and most of your semi-automatics in the concealed carry market are going to be striker-fired. Striker-fired basically means there is an internal striker or firing pin which is spring-loaded, and when the trigger is pulled, it releases the tension on the spring, allowing the pin to strike the back of the round, allowing it to fire. Now, there are double action and single action only concealed carry handguns, but just to keep it simple, we're going to start with a striker-fired. It's going to cover all of your major concealed carry handguns, your Shields, XDSs, Glocks, those sorts of things, okay? Coming over to the revolver world, and revolvers, you typically will see a double or single action, a firearm or a revolver capable of firing in both single or double action. What does that mean? Double action basically means, I'm going to get this on the camera here, when I pull the trigger, two actions are happening, okay? So I pull the trigger, one action is the hammer is brought to the rear, the second action, as you see there, that it fired. Two actions per one pull of the trigger. Now I can go ahead and stage the hammer, and you notice the trigger did index all the way to the rear. Now when I pull the trigger, only one action is going to happen, and that is I'm going to drop the hammer and fire the gun. The semi-automatic, or at least in this case the Shield, is double action only, and it is a striker-fired firearm. So when I pull the trigger, two actions are going to occur. It's going to fire the gun, go into recoil, and reset my striker. Two actions. With a double or single action, you do get different trigger pull weights, and this is going to play into a huge difference between a semi-automatic and a striker-fired gun and a revolver. So what that basically means is, since there's only one fire mode here on the striker-fired pistol, trigger weight tends to be around 5 to 6 pounds, and there's no way you're going to change that without swapping out the trigger and putting in a lighter trigger. In a double action mode on a revolver, that is with the hammer in the forward position, you're going to have to exert all that energy to crank the hammer back and then fire the gun. New out of the box, most revolvers is said to be around anywhere between 7 to 12 pounds for that pull. However, if I do want that lighter pull, I can go ahead and bring that to the rear. Now my hammer is, or my trigger is all the way pulled to the rear of the trigger guard, and with a little bit of effort, I can fire that, and that's usually around 3 to 4 pounds-ish of pressure. Now let's talk about reliability. This is usually the biggest distinction between the two firearms when people are looking between a semi-automatic and a revolver. Okay, so reliability. When you are talking about a semi-automatic, we did talk about you're going to have chambering, firing, the slide is going to go to the rear, the round is going to be extracted and then ejected, and then the slide is going to close, chambering your new round. During that firing process, there is an opportunity for jams to occur. Of course, you can have a spent casing fail to eject, fail to extract, you can fail to rechamber a new round, you can get double feeds, there's a lot of different malfunctions you can get. In a revolver, which you don't have the ejection, the extraction, the rechambering, all the rounds are staying in the cylinder, and as long as we're assuming that all the parts are brand new and functional, a revolver is technically incapable of jamming because there's nothing to jam. The rounds, once fired, aren't going anywhere, they're staying in the cylinder. So that's one huge advantage in a revolver, is you are less likely or less prone to stoppages and jams, which will need to be cleared. The only way really a revolver is going to stop functioning is if parts internally break, which hopefully before you carry the gun, if you take the firearm to the range frequently and test it and fire it, you're going to know that parts are broken, hopefully before you need to use it in a situation. A perfectly functional semi-automatic still has the capability to jam. Faulty ammunition can cause it to jam. Those sorts of things. If you have a faulty or bad round in a revolver, well, you just pull the trigger again, the next round, the chamber turns, indexes your next round, and it fires. Whereas in a semi-automatic, you're going to have to manually clear that bad round before you can resume firing. So it does take a little bit more know-how and skill to be able to effectively clear jams in the event that they occur, which might require more training for you. Now let's talk about the next issue, and that's concealability and size. So when I'm comparing the two, there is going to be a slight advantage in the semi-automatic. Main reason being is a single stack semi-auto, as we're looking at here as shield, is going to be thinner. And you're noticing the main difference here in the revolver is you're noticing the two large protrusions on either side, which is the cylinder. Now in a revolver, you're not going to be able to avoid that. All revolvers, of course, will have to have a cylinder, and you're going to have that wide spacing there to allow for the insertion of all 5 rounds, in this case, in this revolver. Which means it is going to be bulkier and going to be harder to conceal. Typically, two revolvers do have a pretty long footprint, as you see this swooped back pattern coming through the back of the grip. So you overall are going to have a larger firearm in which you're going to have to, now not specifically hugely different in terms of size, in terms of length, but a larger firearm at least in terms of width, which if you want to carry inside the waistband might be a little bit more cumbersome for you, especially if you're a smaller framed person. And it might be a little bit less comfortable, especially if you're getting in and out of a vehicle or anything like that. Another difference you're going to see here is the difference in size as you move from caliber to caliber. Now here I have a 9mm shield, and that's all fine if I want to stay in a 9mm, but if I want that extra bit of stopping power, I might consider going up to a 45, which here I have a 45 caliber shield. Now if I remove this magazine, because the firearm, this is an extended mag, so this is a flush mounted mag, we'll just remove that from the 45. If I compare these two strictly by size, you'll see by going up to a 45, I'm going to try and do this the best I can on camera, I am going to be getting a slightly larger gun. So if I want to go up in terms of power, I am going to have to consider that I am going to have to also go up in size on the firearm. Now the good thing about a revolver, if we're talking at least between 38 Special, and 38 Special is ballistically very similar to a 9mm. But if we're talking the difference between 38 Special here, and I have a Ruger LCR to help demonstrate this, or a 357, there is virtually no change in size. They're the same size firearm. And the reason for that is a 357 and a 38 Special are the diameter on the two rounds is the same. Anyway, so you can transport or you can travel between calibers, at least between a 38 and a 357 without going up much more in size. The same is true though in a semi-automatic. If I were to look at mostly what you'll see is a 9 and a 40, and a concealed carry handgun is going to be about the same size, but you go to a 45 and they will get a little bit bigger. There is one exception to that I know of right off the top of my head. I'm going to grab these for you. Whoops, that was not a gun, thankfully. The difference here is you have a XDS, this is, and see I even have to look, this is the 9, this is the 45, and this is what's cool about the XDS is they fit the same round in the same frame. So these are also the same size semi-automatics, but this is one example of this. I'm not too sure of many others where they fit the 9 and the 45 within the same frame. Now, we did talk about the difference in a revolver in terms of, usually you have the advantages of having a double or single action revolver, which can be true of handguns. You can get a hammer-fired subcompact handgun and to achieve both being able to fire on both single action and double action. The same is true of revolvers, and one negative that a lot of people will say is there is kind of a trade-off in terms of safety and the ease of being able to pull the trigger and fire. So the first handgun that we looked at when we opened this video was the Smith & Wesson, and what it does have is you do see a hammer spur here on the back. It is double and single action, so if I want to load this firearm, and as you can see it's empty, and I want to load 5 rounds here in the cylinder, and then I want to carry it like that, well, I can leave the hammer spur down, and that way I know that if I'm carrying, like if you're carrying in a bag, or if you're carrying inside the waistband or anything like that, I know that there's nothing that's going to reasonably be able to pull all that weight and discharge the firearm. However, there is an added risk there because with this spur extended, especially if you're a woman and you want to carry in a purse, or even if you are carrying inside the waistband and that hammer is exposed, something could potentially brush up against that and unintentionally arm the hammer, and then now you're walking around with a firearm with a cocked hammer on a very, very light trigger pull, which is almost recipe for disaster. Now, they do have holsters out there that have straps over them that can cover this hammer to mitigate the risk of that happening, but that is still something to consider. In order to get away from that potential concern is they do make what are known as hammerless revolvers, so there's no hammer, it's hammerless, which means, of course, that it's double action only. Which means since I don't have that hammer to pull back and index that trigger on, every time I pull the trigger, it has to be that long, heavy double action pull. Now that's good in terms of safety, where I can keep the cylinder loaded. I don't have to worry about a hammer coming back, while I'm carrying, so it's hammerless and I can feel a little bit safer. Also, with the hammer being gone, it makes the overall footprint of the firearm smaller, easier to conceal, and it takes away kind of that pointy edge that you get on the hammer that can kind of stick out in your shirt or something like that. That might print and let people know that you're carrying a firearm. That's kind of a minor concern for most people, however. Now, if you want to be somewhere in between, there is a semi-concealed or a concealed hammer, which, as you can see, if I look at it on, from this plane, it basically looks like there's no hammer, but by turning it, you can see there is a hammer. So by carrying the firearm loaded, it's on double action, the hammer is not back. It's completely covered, so I don't really have a risk of something snagging it and pulling the hammer to the rear. It also keeps that nice slick line. But at any time, if I need to, if I want that nice, accurate, light trigger pull, I can still draw the hammer to the rear because the hammer is still there, and I can use it that way, and I can also, drop the hammer safely. So now let's talk about reloading and reloading, the differences and the disadvantages and advantages basically that each system carries in regards to reloading. So, of course, a huge advantage of a semi-automatic is that you do get a magazine. And this again is the Shield M&P9 Shield 9mm. This is its magazine. If I want to load this magazine up with ammunition and then put it in my firearm, and I want to carry it with a fully loaded magazine in the firearm, I can do that. And then if I need to use the firearm and I want to carry more ammunition with me, I can take a second or a third or a fourth, however many I want, magazine with me fully loaded, so that when I'm empty, and of course the slide will be locked to the rear when I'm empty, a reload is no more difficult than just dropping the spent magazine, chambering in a new one, and then going back into battery, and I'm ready to fire. I even did that very slowly, and as you could see, it just took a matter of seconds, okay? If we have a revolver, there are basically 3 essential loading systems, loading and unloading systems, and I'll argue that all 3 of them are still much slower than a semi-automatic, okay? The first is going to be, and let me first go over what this is. This is a snap cap. A snap cap is a false or a dummy round. This is not live ammunition. You see them all here. These are basically practice rounds, so it's not live ammo. I'm not about to load live ammo into a gun. So to basically load a revolver, I can do this in a few ways. I can drop them in one at a time into the cylinder. and then close it and fire. Now keep in mind, when I'm empty, I'm going to have to push this button here, roll out the cylinder, turn my gun upside down and dump them. Okay? Keep in mind though, when you're actually firing live ammunition, those casings tend to expand a little bit and can be a little bit tough to get out of the cylinder. Usually this is your ejector rod. Usually a nice firm tap on that rod will just, basically what this is doing is moving that arm to push the rounds out the rear of the cylinder. Then if I am using this loading system, not only would I have to carry loose rounds in my pocket or in a bag or something, but upon wanting to reload, I will have to put them back in one at a time. And as you can see, that can be pretty slow. Okay. And again, this is a Smith & Wesson Model 637, so I'm going to try and remember to tell you the models of the firearms I'm using for these videos, okay? Another method, and I'm going to switch over here, this is a Taurus Tracker 44 Magnum. Okay, another method of reloading, show you that it is clear, is by use of a speed loader. And this is a speed loader. And what this basically is a device that holds your rounds in place, all in unison together, so that if I want to then reload the firearm, I can take this whole unit, I can drop it into the rear just like that, I can then unlock the rounds like that, and then pull out the speed loader and they all drop in. I fire the firearm. When I'm done, I still have to eject my empty casings the same way. I'll push on this and remove them out the back. And then if I have another speed loader, I can go ahead and take that and drop those in. Still a little bit slower, but with really, really good practice, you can get that down pretty fast. So let me stick that over there. One big difference, though, to remember is a fully loaded speed loader. Even though it looks smaller, this is very slim and sleek and easy to shove into a pocket. These, especially loaded, can be pretty bulky, and if you're going to carry a few of them, it's like carrying a huge extra set of car keys. I mean, it's bulky, kind of uncomfortable, and not easily concealable if you're going to carry multiples of them. So another system I can use here is what's known as a moon clip. And a moon clip essentially is a little clip where I can stick the casings, the neck of each casing, a semi-automatic casing, into this clip so it holds it together as a cohesive unit like you see in there. And the cool thing is, and you can kind of see that, is I've dropped the whole system, the clip with all the 5 rounds of 9mm ammunition on there, all together into a single grouping, if you will. And the whole thing, including the clip, goes in, and then the firearm can close. The reason we use those is because if you're firing, like for example, this is an LCR chambered in 9mm. And a 9mm is a semi-automatic, it's a round fired in semi-automatic handguns. The difference between a semi-automatic round and a revolver round is a revolver, typical revolver round like a 38 Special, a 357, a 44 Magnum has a rim to allow the casing to sit inside the cylinder and not fall all the way through. Now a semi-automatic round like a 9 or a 40 or a 45 does not have that rim, so if you put it into a revolver without that moon clip on there, it'll just fall through. So here we have the moon clip all loaded up, and the moon clip itself will stay in there with the rounds of ammunition. So I can have other moon clips already loaded and ready to go. I can drop the whole unit in there as one piece, chamber it into the firearm by closing the cylinder, and I'm ready to fire my 5 shots of ammunition, and then when it's empty, I just opened up the cylinder and the whole unit falls out together, including the clip. Then I can take another moon clip and put it in there. So a little bit faster than a speed loader in some cases, but keep in mind you're only going to be able to use those moon clips when you're using semi-automatic ammunition like a 9, a 40, a 45, a 380, or you can use them for a 38 Special, a 357, a 44 Magnum. But remember, there must be a recess cut out in your cylinder to allow that moon clip to sit in there. So if you're considering getting a revolver and a moon clip system is something that you would like to utilize, make sure you're either getting a revolver chambered in a semi-automatic pistol caliber or it's cut out for moon clips. The last thing we're going to consider when we're talking about a revolver versus a semi-automatic is sights. Now most of your, and again we're talking about the concealed carry market, most of your revolvers are going to have sort of what's known as like a gutter sight. It is and I'm going to try and do this best for you. You see the sight picture is you just have a kind of a cutout notch in the back, a channel along the top, and just a simple post in the front. Now, a lot of your revolvers are going to basically, your concealed carry revolvers are going to have that at a certain sight set up. Just keep a lower profile on the top of the firearm, making it basically a smaller package. But your sight picture is not going to be the best, okay? When you're talking about concealed carry anyway, you're most likely going to be very close to your target if you have to pull your firearm and use it in a defensive situation. But still, it would be nice to have a little bit nicer sights. There are some revolvers that do come equipped with a little bit nicer sights, but by and large, this is the type of style you're going to see on a revolver, concealed carry revolver. The same is true if I pick up the LCR, similar sighting system. Okay. When we're talking about semi-automatics, of course, and we've gone over this in the other video, you do have, your 3-dot sights, which are a lot easier to pick up. In most cases, this is the type of sighting system you're going to see on like a single stack 9mm. Now, if you get down to like a pocket gun, and I'll do a video on the differences between a pocket gun or just like a single stack 9 or 40 or 45, you're typically going to have a little bit nicer sights. Again, the XDS, you have things like a high-vis, front fiber optic, which is going to make, do this for you, a little bit nicer sight picture. Not a huge deal, but something at least worth noting. Well, hopefully that gave you some good information to start out with. Remember, always feel free to come on in and check us out. Marksman Shooting Sports, Westfield, Indiana. We do have all these firearms obviously in stock. Love to have you guys come in, ask some questions, get your hands on them, feel them out. If you don't live in our area and you have any questions, send us a message via Facebook or a YouTube channel. We'll be happy to answer any of those questions or do any other videos with any of these firearms if you have particular things that I left out that you wanted to see or have me talk a little bit about. Again, this is Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.